So we are in really active period of JavaScript language development. It grows so fast and infrastructure around it as well. Really care about tools you use because they are what make you your best. All new and all projects use some tools, libraries, compilers, whatever, to cover business needs. And for the last few years, we got a lot of JavaScript tooling, Power, Grunt, Rollup, Webpack, whatever. For backend guys who try to refresh their front-end knowledge nowadays, it looks pretty messy. Also, it's really hard to start front-end learning nowadays. And always bet on Webpack. It's a tweet by Brendan Eich, who is the creator of JavaScript language. And when Angular 2 was introduced and started as a project by Google, they switched to System.js as model system. It has its own pros and cons. It tries to follow JavaScript native module specification, but it's pretty complex to configure it, and it do only one thing for us. Later, they switched to Webpack as more mature tool, and it do a lot of stuff, not only bundling, but asynchronous code loading, code splitting, styles bundling, and whatever you want to configure with a plugin, because it's really a pluggable system. So Angular team bet on Webpack. So it's me trying to configure just another Webpack config. Sometimes developer can waste a lot of time configuring, tweeting, tuning, bundler, instant writing, business logic for the application. Personally, I can waste 8 hours to define the best configuration I want, even if I want to configure some code splitting that fits a particular project needs. So developers are lazy, and that is why we want to encapsulate all crazy stuff in some pretty fancy interface, and we avoid boring things. We need to control complexity. And Angular core team did it for us in open source project called Angular CLI. They created it to help us automate workflow building Angular application. So it makes all boring stuff for you. It helped you to scaffold-based application structure. It creates all files, all dependencies. It helps you to generate new parts of your application and reducing copy-pasting stuff and so on. It follows all best practices and coding standards created by Angular core team, and forces you as developer to follow them by linters and TypeScript configuration. It configures testing tools for you for end-to-end and unit tests, and creates base specification structure for you. Also, it helps you to build your app during development and for production. So let's start with scaffolding. Before you can do something with Angular CLI, you need to install it globally by npm or yarn, or even not install it globally, but use it with npx. Npx is a pretty awesome thing that was announced with npm 5, and it allows you not to download and install module, but instead it fetches this cache and allow you to use just as it is. Next, we need to run very simple command, ngnu and add your application name. And here we go. We have initial structure, folders, TypeScript configurations, all dependencies installed for us, and so on. At such moments, I feel myself like Dragon's mother. Just one command and machine prepare everything for you. So what did we got out of the box? We got best practices and coding standards. We got all needed dependencies in place. We got TypeScript and test configuration, and also some environment setting. I'll talk about them a little bit later. So, is it all? No, we have some additional params to help us build our needs. So, for example, we have prefix as Angular itself try to follow web component specification. Any component need to be prefixed to define that is custom element. And you can define your own for whole application. You can generate routing model. You can skip installation process and do it yourself later if you want. You can skip git commit and initial initialization of git repository. And also you can specify preprocessor, what you need if you use something, and even more. So let's look on more complex example. Here we create a new application called cool app. We add prefix cool. So every component and directive generated by Angular CLI will include this prefix for us. We choose SAS as preprocessor and use SCSS as syntax for it, and also we generate routing. But CLI is awesome. We can make progressive web out of a box. Unfortunately, now it is disabled by default, but it's pretty simple to enable it. You need to install few dependencies like service worker, platform server, ngPVI tools. Then you need to enable it in Angular CLI JSON. Angular CLI JSON is a configuration file for Angular CLI itself. So you can do it with a command ngset apps 0 service worker true, or edit JSON file itself and set this parameter. You might have a question why we use 0 here. It's because Angular CLI supports multiple applications for one CLI instance out of a box. So you can have 3 or 5 applications at one bundle. So what next? We already have a base structure for our application, and we probably want to put some things inside it. So we have simple command for that, ngGenerate, or alias, ngg. And out of the box now, Angular CLI supports generation of modules, components, directives, pipes, services, guards, interfaces, enums, and simple classes. Each of these parameters use its own blueprint and allow you to pass additional, more specific parameters to each of them. Let's try to create new component for our application. Let it be some title. So we run the command, and here we go. We got CSS template for us, specification file, component file, but wait, it also seems that it edits our main app module. So what it did? It imported our new created title component for us and put it inside declaration block inside module decorator. So now you can use this title component widely in your app. And it's a little bit of magic here, but we will back to it soon. So let's try to generate a module. Also, we add a parameter specifying that we want to create routing module for that. And it creates two modules for us, feature routing module and feature module. So when we look inside, we see magic again. It imported our routing module at the same time when it created feature module itself. It's pretty interesting. CLI seems to be smart. Let's try next. Let's generate a component for inside our newly created feature module. Also add some emit specification file creation and inline template for it. So we execute the command. We got component CSS, component TS file, and again it updates feature module, not the root one. It adds the newly created var component inside the feature module, put its declaration in decorator, and also it used inline template for our new component. And nothing happened for root module. Interesting. Also, Angular CLI is pretty flexible. Using Angular CLI JSON file, you can specify defaults for each of generation parameter. So here I change detection strategy by default to on push and view encapsulation to native. That probably will use Shadow DOM instead of emulation of Shadow DOM. Also here you can see that we got some fancy help for us to what parameters it allows for us and what values for that. Angular CLI also come with a schema for Angular CLI JSON file. So it will be helpful when you are using some code editor or IDE of your choice. So let's generate another component called foo for our feature module. And now you can see that it adds our defaults, encapsulation, and change detection as we specified in Angular CLI, and it adds all necessary imports for us as well. Is it a magic? Not really. You shouldn't believe in unicorns. Angular CLI not just regex replacement in blueprints. It really analyzes your application. It builds some kind of abstract syntax tree of your application and has a semantic understanding of what is going on. What modules do you have, what relations between them, and what components included. So when you're trying to define some component, for example, it looks inside the tree and try to find the closest module and put declarations inside it. So you have an app, you know how to add some things for it. Next thing that you need serving for development. And we have pretty simple command, ngserve. And here we go. You can open the link on localhost and see your newly created application. But a ton of boring stuff doing under the hood for you. What it performs? It compiles your styles and puts it inside separate file or even inline style tags. It transpiles your TypeScript, check all typings, errors, bundle your models, make code splitting, run different optimization, uglify, minify styles. Also, it allows you to live reload your application during development. So while you editing something, it will refresh the page. Or even you can enable hot module replacement provided by Webpack. But it requires a little bit of custom setup for you. And also code splitting. By default, Angular CLI supports code splitting by routing. So for lazy loaded route, you can define module and use some special syntax provided by Angular. And it will create a separate chunk for it. Also, we got some environment parameters. So out of the box, we have two of them, for development and for production. Also, you can specify your own custom environment. So what's the difference between development and production mode? Development mode generates source map to help you debug your code in browser while development. It uses JIT compilation as it just-in-time compilation that is faster than AOT ahead of time compilation, and use name chunks that allow you to see what lazy loaded module loaded in the browser, because by default it uses some numbers with hashes instead normal human readable names. Instead of development, production mode enable all optimizations. It minifies your JavaScript, your styles. It compiles Angular in ahead of time mode compilation, and extract your styles in separate file. Here is the example of addition a custom flag to your environment file. It could be useful, for example, when you have different environment for backend, I mean some REST API calls on development and production mode. And you can easily switch between them using these environment files. To use such flag, you need just only import environments from Angular and try to switch between this flag. And here we can specify our custom environment. All you need just to create some new key inside Angular CLI JSON file and follow naming convention. Your file should be named as environment.yourenvironmentname.ts and will be included in environments folder. But how to use it? It's pretty simple. Just pass ngserve environment parameter with argument of your custom environment name. Here I also added flag to enable hot module replacement. And I created environment.html TS file. And here I am defining that hot module replacement is true. Next, very complex and similar to serving is building. Actually, serve including build step in it. It is a command, ng-build. And here we pass parameter to specify that we need production build. Execute it and you go get all polyfills, main files, styles, everything bounded for you with hashes with to force browser caches. And it do all boring stuff for you. Now you can just put this directory and upload it to some remote server, and you got pretty working Angular application in production mode. Also, Angular CLI provides few plugins to deploy your application to Github and Firebase. The most boring stuff is testing. Under boring, I mean not the test itself, but configuration for that, to set up all environment. Actually, we have ng test for unit tests run and ng end-to-end to end-to-end tests. With each generated component, service, directive, pipe, whatever, you got base specification files for free. It imports all needed Angular helpers for you, set up your component instantiation, and create some pretty common test case for you. What is inside? For unit tests, the same environment was chosen, Karma. It's proven tool, it has a lot of extension points. For my own project at work, I use, for example, Karma City Reporter to have fancy output in CI builds. Also, you can generate code coverage, which target browser you want to use, and so on. End-to-end integration testing, it using Protractor. It was created especially for Angular 1, and now it gives the power to run Angular 2 and 4 and 5 application unit test, end-to-end testing. It still have some compatibility issues, open pull requests are waiting to resolve these issues. But in general, it's only some edge cases, like handling the mock REST APIs and so on. And in the end, you can just eject everything and go out of Angular CLI, do all stuff yourself, configure Webpack, and so on. You need to run ng eject, and it will bring you all Webpack config files and so on. Everything will be inside your application folder. But probably there is two rules to use eject. First one is don't do it, and second one for experts only, don't do it yet. So why? You want to really waste your time to maintain building scripts. Believe me, it might be a huge amount of time. Even when some Webpack major version released, you need to perform some migrations, explore new configuration options, whatever. And Angular CLI do it for you via Angular core team and open source contributors. Also, in the future, we will get some extension points, some access to Webpack configuration, possibility to create custom plugins for it, and much more. So, as I mentioned, some future features of Angular CLI. Let's back to the future. So, what we will get on next releases? Angular CLI itself is based on Ember CLI, and it internally uses blueprints for generating new stuff. And for Ember, they have ability to create your own custom one. Now, for Angular CLI, they're using the same blueprints, but external blueprints are disabled now. It will be available in next releases. And it has really good use cases. For example, when you are using ngRigs, that is Redux implementation for Angular 2, you need to scaffold a lot of similar files for every module, for example. It will be actions file, reducer file, selectors, effects, and imports for your module. It will be pretty cool to create some generators for all this boring stuff. As I mentioned before, you will get some Webpack access. It's still under construction and discussions what will be the layer of accessing, but it will be probably. You will get code refactoring that will allow you to switch to major Angular release pretty easy. You will just run some simple command and all deprecated APIs will be changed for you. Also, Angular automatically. And what I'm personally waiting for is library mode. Because when you need to create some external library on GitHub, open source project, you need to follow pretty complex workflow to support AOT mode, to set up all things, to run rollup, to make your output files tiny, you need to generate metadata and so on. And it's really boring. And it will be great to have such ability from Angular CLI. But that's not all. Also, they will enable AOT mode on every build, even on development. So they announced watching mode for NGC, that is probably Angular compiler, and it will allow us to build and test AOT builds while development. Also, build optimizers, they are on beta now and will be enabled by default in the future. And progressive web app generators will be enabled by default. So, that's all from my side. Thank you all. If you have questions, we have a few minutes to discuss if something.